A small number of people. Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so welcome to the Enterprise Agile global community. And we it looks like we have a small group here tonight, and we apologize for our Zoom issues 2 weeks ago when when we initially tried to do this. And some of you who watched the recording may have been here then. We hope you get a chance to watch the recording for Gene. The Enterprise Agile Global Community has been around for somewhere around a decade. We've had, I think, a couple different names. And during the pandemic, we started as a San Francisco group. Our group spread. So I'm here from Seattle. One of our co-chairs who's not here tonight is from Southern California. We have another down in Texas, and our community itself reaches around the world. With that, Rob, do you want to introduce our speaker for tonight?
Yes, indeed. Our honored guest today is Gene Gendel, who I know from his co-creation and support for Scrum Alliance's certified team coach, as well as through his world-class large-scale Scrum training and community involvement. Take it away, Gene.
Oh wow, that was too sweet, too short, but and too generous. Thank you both. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Rob. So I'm pleased. I'm glad to be here. I'm honored. I know we have a very small group, and in a way, it's probably a good opportunity to not even treat it as a webinar. It's a conversation. I may remain as a centerpiece just for a little bit because I have something to say, something to share. But then we can just open up I'm happy if everyone contributes equally. In fact, I want to also treat right and greet my good friend and colleague James Carpenter here too. He's also a certified Les trainer like myself, although this isn't about Les per se, not specifically about Les, but I'm pleased to see him here too.
Thank you, Gene.
You can say hi, James. Okay.
Hi, James here.
Yeah. And yeah, so thank you, Rob, for paving the road. So today's topic is again, I'm a I'm a funny guy. Some people say you're too funny. Sometimes, you try to be funny. So I like cartoons and graphics and irony. So a lot of what I'm going to show, what I'm going to say is going to be built around irony and some humorous stuff. Okay, so today's conversation is going to be about what is the true agile enterprise, and I'm going to use very simple language, layman terms. I will try not to lose anyone or impress anyone with the jargon or slogans. Okay. So enough about me. By the way, I don't use a PowerPoint. I use a PDF because it's a cheap way, poor man's way to annotate something just like so. Okay. So if I need to say something, I'll do this. So enough about me. Like Ron, you did say it fairly. I have been around Scrum Alliance for a long, long time, and I was involved. Forget about these badges. I actually contributed at some point in creating. At some point, was very strong, very, 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 upscale programs called Certified Team Coach. Put a lot of time and effort into it, a lot along with others. I was proud of what I did, and there were some others that did the same. All right, my company is a one-stop shop, one small operation by me, myself, and I. I happen to teach and coach less a lot, large-scale Scrum, organizational design system that is specifically invented through experiments for large-scale, multi-site product development. But this conversation isn't about less per se. Anyway, and I do teach, so I have classes that are posted online. Again, this just mentioned in passing, one coming up online in a couple of weeks. Okay. So let me share with you what my world looks like, and you are, you are experienced enough to associate with some of this. Probably have seen some of this, and you may even have sentiments that are similar to mine, right? It's the chaos out there. It's the craziness. too many people that have highly ranked titles. They are in the lose-lose proposition competitive game, trying to compete for compensation, for bonuses, for promotion, for a raise, and usually some people that actually maybe genuinely wanting to improve things, they're genuinely confused. They're very confused. So here I'm going to single out a person who probably does not want to see this theater, but has no other choice but to watch this. It's the CEO, and of course, very ironically and sadly, people that actually produce value that sit in the background. They're, the poor team, the scrum masters and developers, they're in the doorway actually observing this chaos and probably, feeling not so great about themselves. Um, Even further on the subject on who runs the show and who are these people, who is a part of this circus, this theater. Everyone named one of these days almost has the the label Agile to it, to their title, and of course, a coach comes with it. So again, kind of redundant to what I shared on the previous slide, and maybe even cynical. But if you think of any large organization, everyone named Mother is doing something that has a name tag. Coaching has a name tag Agile to it, and this is why, no surprise, that we might have reached a plateau of our industry is so badly diluted, so overloaded, so over flooded with people that mostly career chasers and don't really play the role of true change agents. Companies are getting tired. Companies are getting sick, and many companies don't wish any longer to pay, a big buck for this. 10, 15 years ago, it was a thing. Now, lots of companies are actually very skeptical about this. It doesn't mean that what we do, agile coaching and teaching is no longer. It doesn't mean it's no longer valid or important or critical. It's just the perception is no longer what it used to be, and I'm not even sure if we can blame anyone specifically. It's just the system that has gone where it goes, but where it has gone. Again, so I'm going to build up a little bit on some of the not so great sentiments to explain what has gotten us to a place where we're at today, and then we'll try to build this back up to something positive. All right, so again, my everyday reality, at least where I go, I often see this, and I obviously frame this in my own language, not to be confused with. This is not to be confused with the greatest test-driven development. Excuse me, that would be TDD, but this is DDT and TDT and DDT. Tool-driven transformations like Jira's and Rallies and version ones and VSTSs of the world, and also lots of heavy decks and heavy presentations. So this is what used to be, one of the biggest reasons why, and has been and still remains one of the biggest reasons why this theater has gotten us to a place where there's so much skepticism and dissatisfaction with agile coaching and agile training and agile everything. Okay, so over the years I have boiled down, at least this is my personal perception, my personal view, these three words seem to me the most heavily abused. And today's presentation is about agile enterprise. Ironically, surprisingly, these two words are, on the list. And of course, this slide wasn't created specifically for this talk. This graphic is actually like maybe 10 years old. I just reuse it every time I need it. Historically, some of you may know this, but some of you may not. The word agile was not even, well, why has it been heavily abused is because it is not as of a common sense layman term as some other words that we know. So people, when they hear the word agile, they just don't even think of it as an adjective. They think of it as something else, like a noun or a verb sometimes, like we're going to do agile. So a very good litmus test is to compare it with the word adaptive. And historically, you may not know this, but in Snowbird, Utah in 2001, when the word was chosen, Agile, it wasn't the first choice. And some of you that heard some old timers speak, you would know, especially those people that were at snowboard at the resort. The word adaptive was the first choice, and the decision was not to use it because of some reasons that would gravitate attention one way versus another from someone who was there. I'm not going to be dropping any names. So, and natively, they discussed and decided that, hey, why not use this synonymous word agile? And of course, they are synonymous words, so you can check one with the other. And if the meaning does not change, most likely people are using it correctly. But 9 out of 10 times today, if you ask people to define the word agile, they will give you a very gross, very, very poor definition. They'll say it's fast, it's cheap, they'll just give some other, very odd definition to it, which it was not meant to be. So if it's with the word adaptive, it's slightly different because the word adapt is like, hey, can you adapt to the situation? Can you adapt to conditions, to the environment? That's a little more layman term. So these two actually are easy to align. And the second point I was going to make is about the word enterprise. And so again, if you have an organization that is like a huge bank, like 50,000 people, if someone claims that the IT department of 700 or 1,700 people is an enterprise, this is probably a wrong claim because an enterprise expects to have enough modules, enough constituents, enough components to make this autonomous living and independent entity. An IT department of 1,700 people is not it. It's just a large organizational vertical, large organizational structure. On the other hand, a company of 50, 100 people could be considered a small enterprise if all of its critical constituents elements are present, such as HR, finance, legal, vendor management, business, all that good stuff. We need to make sure it's a part of the equation. It's a part of the definition of an enterprise. And of course, that puts a huge it puts a lot of pressure on the definition of the word enterprise, and many organizations, many people today would be not able to reclaim what they used to call an enterprise because it wouldn't fit the bill. It wouldn't meet the criteria of true enterprise. Autonomy, sovereignty, and purpose, and ability to run its own. It's like a living organism. Okay. And I'm not going to talk much about scaling today. Scaling is another, poorly used word, actually very abused because this conversation it's not specific about scale. So economically speaking, so speaking of the economics, I'm not a CPA, I'm not an accountant, but I know a little something about economics, very basic economics. And I would agree, I hope you would agree with me that any agile transformation, the return on it should be higher. So the ratio of the return to the investment itself should be more than one. Otherwise, we're losing money, right? We're not, Ron is thumbs up. Yeah, I think agility is not about going faster. It's be more adaptive, more nimble, light-footed. But if we're actually taking a step and then making an investment, time, energy, and money into an agile transformation, we want to see some return on this investment. It could be in many different forms. We'll become more competitive, more adaptive, more robust, more as an organization. So anyway, more successful as a product company. So that number should be more than one. Okay. And if it's not, of course, we're doing something wrong. So speaking a little more about economics, and this is also getting us maybe a little closer to the concept of an enterprise, right? Look at the left-hand side of this image. You see this huge tower, right? And it's got different layers, departments, compartments. This is a very traditional layered organization, huge, maybe thousands and thousands of people. There's a lot of managerial support in spirit, what's called. We're going to sign the bill. We're going to check off the box. We're going to give you X number of $1 million. Go figure it out. Usually these So, and of course, they expect this to be like the next best thing, and the transformation goes off. Yeah, do this enterprise transformation for us. Then, of course, they are very broad and shallow, very superficial big bangs, lots of lip surface, top down. There are no experiments. They kind of unpack and install everything from a get-go. They don't give it a chance, the benefit of the doubt. Thousands of people are involved, both on business and on technology and in operations and in marketing and sales. And you have lots of leftover people that are typically, I don't want to dismiss any profession or any role, but certain roles are sort of outdated these days. And with AI coming in the door, even more roles will become outdated. But even they are involved, even they are engaged. So, and this is not a cheap exercise. This costs a lot of money with tooling, with licensing, everything under the sun. So this is not a cheap trip. It costs a lot, and it's very risky, and it impacts lots of lives, and it's usually followed by horrible rifts. I've seen many of these, so-called enterprise agile transformations ending up on their backs and translating into rifts, reduction in force, people being let go. Now, on the right-hand side, what I'm showing to you is an example of not a free, there's still money involved, some costs involved in this, but a very methodical, very, very careful, very surgically, administered, deep and narrow, systemic improvement type of transformation. You have both top, bottom, and bottom up meaningful efforts, lots of experiments. Participation, a lot is done by volunteering and commitment as opposed to compliance and obedience. It's not something we just unpack and install by force. We organically, gradually roll it out by first educating people, then preparing the runway, and then flipping the switch. Again, the number of people involved is rather limited, and of course, you do a lot of preparation and you involve all of those organizational elements that are required to for this to be called a small enterprise. Now, here on the left, this whole conversation, this whole effort could be just around the R&D or research and development, or like incorrect or somewhere false way of calling it as an IT department. Let's convert 15,000 people. Let's turn them into Agile. Let's put them all on some tooling solution. Let's buy 15,000 licenses. We'll manufacture workflows and on and we go. So we don't really involve. We don't really change the pattern. We don't change how this huge organizational vertical operates and correlates to anything else. So we essentially are, faking it. Just because it's something is big and very numerous, has a huge number to it, does not mean this is a true enterprise. This is on the left. On the right, although very few people might be involved, respectively few, relatively few, only maybe 50, 60 cross-functional developers, a bunch of users or customers, a product owner, a handful of people from executive management, scrum masters, finance, budgeting, site strategies, people that are actually involved in orchestrating organizational design. That would be an enterprise, a small enterprise, but an enterprise. Okay. So, and just a little more on the economics of this. I'm not here to bash any specific frameworks, but kind of, I have this itchy trigger finger to mention, right? Look, it's all about money in the end, right? If you can actually monetize pretty much anything you have in the market, and the litmus test is simple. If something makes you gazillions of dollars, it does not, it means just you have a great product out there. It does not automatically mean this great product does a lot of greatness to whoever consumes it. That just doesn't mean that. You can think of cigarettes. A company that makes cigarettes makes gazillions of dollars. Do cigarettes do any good to people that buy it? The answer is no. So think of this as, how much money has been transacted, how how many bills have been signed, how many contracts have been executed, and of course, our beloved, commercially successful framework that has gone through so many different iterations. Of course, an enterprise, so-called enterprise of 50,000 people will most likely be doing this. It's almost guaranteed that we'll unpack and install, buy and unpack and install thousands and thousands of licenses that will try to align their existing organizational structure to what these tooling conventions are and what this commercially successful framework tells them. So yes, it may look like, look, this is an agile transformation at the enterprise level, but essentially it's really not a transformation. It's more of a relabeling. Everything fits right back where it used to be with slightly different terminology applied. So as a side note, I want to say this. Organizational structure is the first order factor that defines everything. It's the most important system variable, if you will. An entire ecosystem is based on the way we structure our organization. For a large organization, this holds to be true. For smaller orgs, if like 7 or 8 of us or 9 of us decide to build our own company, we shall build it around our own norms, principles, values, behaviors, culture. We're going to bring it to the table, and those constituents will become the building blocks for the structure. But if we join a very large organization, any company, large company, we actually, when we're in Rome, we're going to act like Romans. So expect that to happen. And so when it comes to scaling, and everyone loves this word, right? How can we scale this? Especially for a large enterprise. This is an important thing. We don't just scale because we're big. So if you have a large company or a large pharmaceutical, a healthcare company, you don't just apply the scaling idea just because your organization is huge. You do it because there's a true need to amplify, to improve some goodness you have in the first place. And this goodness, this in the first place, the good stuff in the first place could be something as minimalistic, as minimal as good old Scrum, teams working on a single team working on a relatively small product. So here the major drive to scale would be your product definition expansion, or originally a wide product definition that requires more than just one team. And that, of course, would be so if you properly define your product, and if you build teams around the product and you give them full autonomy and support and add some additional elements to this org structure that is tailored specifically for product development, and management and marketing and sales, then of course you can rightfully call it an enterprise. This is actually a skip through slide. I'm not going to spend any time on this. I thought of discussing this explicitly, but I probably won't do this because it's a little too dense. This is my compare and contrast of traditional portfolio management to lean portfolio management. It's called LPM. Excuse me, to large scale product management. The dimensions are the same, but what we look at is different. I'm actually rethinking whether or not I should be covering this today, but I'm going to keep it here in the deck in case if you want to reference this. I guess my thinking was here, I wanted to kind of talk about the LPM and large scale product development as much better ways of managing for smaller enterprises that were gravitating towards product centricity and lean. So, but I kind of did not, so let me just skip through it. So let me go back to the concept of enterprise agility, right? To an agile enterprise. So again, this is one of my oldest slides. Wasn't created specifically for this discussion, but I think it's very relevant. So what is fragmented agility? Is when many organizational departments or layers or silos kind of want to jump in a bandwagon of we want to be agile, we want to do agility too. And what ends up happening is that you have many asynchronous, independent, as if it wasn't bad enough, also conflicting attempts to be agile with different standards, different KPIs, different OKRs, different goals, different understanding, different perception. And although all of these elements, again, on point and very important, all of these elements are important constituents of organizational systemic agility. Individually, by themselves, each one independently, um, shouldn't be treated as an enterprise anything, and shouldn't be really given a lot of um, I don't want to say do not give it autonomy. Yes, I would like to say do not give it autonomy in the sense of full independency so they can run off on their own as as cowboys, as yahoos. Because for the organization to be robust and dynamic and and truly adaptive front to back, you need presence of all of these elements. For example, in order for a product organization, and I tend to gravitate towards products and organizations that build and deliver products. You cannot not have a sales department involved in this or marketing department involved in this. Why? Because who's going to sell? Who's going to market your product? You cannot not have DevOps as a practice embedded in your cross-functional team capabilities. You cannot, exclude vendor management practices if you need to staff people. If you need to staff your teams, hopefully long term by using external people. So there are many things here that you certainly cannot exclude HR because the way people are treated, the way people are promoted, um, elevated, compensated, very much defines how they're going to operate, how they're going to act together. So HR norms and policies, super, super important. And in fact, HR business partners and HR recruiters and internal HR experts need to be trained and need to be educated on ways agile teams work, because otherwise they would be optimizing for things that are destructive, deconstructive to what we expect. I can just give you one or two examples. If if team members are not incentivized to learn different skills, different techniques, they will remain as single function specialty experts, and it's a very good reason why, because they don't get paid, they don't get compensated or recognized for doing something else. So that goes right back to HR norms and policies and how their roles are defined and what they're being compensated for and how they're being promoted. Okay, just a little more on that, and I'm a big proponent of thinking of HR as a huge element, that's responsible for organizational agility, enterprise agility, enterprise adaptiveness. Okay, so I actually read all of these books at different points in my career. I don't ask me to quote any of them. They are all very unique in their own way, complementary, but there's a one overarching theme. This actually the theme that actually can be explained by Daniel Pink's great video.
I get headphones.
RC Animate, when he says, you got to remove the question of money off from the table so people can refocus on what they love to do on their work. So anyway, that's just another thing. And of course, this comes with that. No one likes APAs today, unless it's an IPA that's in the bottle. No one loves this. So, and then again, on point for true agile enterprise to function well. I think I've said it enough, right? HR norms and policies. HR must be fully engaged and included in the transformation, and that actually makes your enterprise a much stronger and much more inclusive org structure. And of course, my other on point would be budgeting. You really want to think of finance and budgeting as a huge element of your enterprise organizational structure and dynamics. I've seen more than enough teams and departments trying to change the way they develop and the way they manage and the way they deliver without really paying attention to how they fund things. And that's the most almost like ironic, ridiculous thing to me. This is in fact why I had this slide here in the first place, because one big part here is the way your funding model works, right? So, for example, for the organization that is still uses traditional portfolio management, like, you know, more like a waterfall style, PMO driven, PMO governed um, organization. They will be mostly project based with fixed funding tied to scope, timeline, and cost. Everything is very strict, very, very solid, very, 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 very rough, and not something you can easily change. Doesn't dynamically change. So with something like this, you try to do an enterprise level of transformation or adoption, whatever you wish to call it. You will be doing very superficial, almost immaterial changes that will look, maybe appealing on the surface, but down below, nothing will be changing. And then things would not be working in the end the way you expect them, and you will be wondering, why is there so much frustration? Why can't we deliver on time? Why are we delivering stuff that our users and customers no longer want? Well, because you funded everything up front, you're changing nothing, you're reflecting to nothing, you're not inspecting and adapting. So the requirement that you developed to and delivered was outdated 6 months ago, but you continued working on it because it was already funded. And if you stopped, you would have lost your, steam, your team, you would lose your team members probably, and you would have to let them go. And you as a manager would lose that, sacred control that you had. So funding for traditional portfolio management is really not too conducive with an enterprise agility whatsoever. Now you get a little better, well, significantly better if you get to LPM, because you can dynamically fund various efforts. Most of them hopefully are product centric, but some of them could be services, or some of them could be capabilities that are not, they cannot be rightfully called products, but still customer centric and user centric. So that's getting even better. And of course, if you are doing large scale product management, where you have persistent product funding tied to outcomes and strategy with dynamic, cascading down funds, you are even in a better position. You're even more mature. So anyway, kind of was not planning to talk about this slide, but ended up saying something. So the net is this. This whole conversation about changing the mindset and improving, making our mindset more agile. It's I don't want to call this as completely irrelevant, but it's kind of second, third degree of importance. It's almost a little bit childish to talk about mindset if we do not talk about people and organizational surroundings around them. Kind of redundant. Organizational conditions around them. So you really want to address organizational design first and foremost. And instead of jumping to conclusions that, hey, if we're big, this is an enterprise level effort, don't do that. I don't think it should be done that way. It's much better to do it deep and narrow by carving out an organizational structure that is autonomous and independent enough with proper support, and you want to go very deep and narrow and improve that part of the organization. Hopefully you can build it around a product so that you don't, so organically your organization will be structured around a product, which makes sense to me at least, because, products get sold. That's how you make money, and you can then fund gradually your entire effort. And if this is successful, then you can gradually expand, and your enterprise will be naturally getting bigger and bigger by absorbing other organizational structures that want to jump in the bandwagon. And if you're a small company or a mid-sized company, do not, don't just copycat mistakes of large organizations, because they have probably more money. They can enough money to waste. You don't. I always recommend to small and mid-sized companies, think hard, think smart about what you're doing, where you're spending your money. You don't have this luxury of, pissing away thousands of millions of dollars, the same exact way banks do. They can, you cannot. Okay. This is just a pass-through slide. Of course, this is my own making of the organizational structure, organizational system called Logical Scrum, which rightfully should be called an ecosystem and a product-centric organizational system that is a true enterprise because not only does it have a very lean, very flattened organizational structure that minimalistically busy and has only those roles with many more responsibilities per role that it needs to have for successful product development. It also has those elements of the organizational ecosystem that we have, the aforementioned, such as HR norms and policies, career path, belongs to HR, funding, budgeting, site strategies, legal, marketing, sales. All of that is a part of the smallish compared to some other big things, organizational ecosystem that gives it autonomy and sovereignty and purpose. So in my world, in my maybe nirvana state for some people, a large-scale Scrum organizational system is a true ecosystem, is a true enterprise that actually it's much more resilient to AI expectations than any other organization that I know, any other structures that I know, because it also has minimalistic waste. It also doubles down on continued learning and quality dynamic learning, and therefore there's a less chance that people within this organizational design structure called large-scale Scrum would be substituted by machines. Machines, if anything, will be in support of people, not a substitution to people. So I'm going to stop here because there's nothing else for me to say other than just open up, and hopefully we can turn this into a conversation if you would like. If you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and throw them out.
So I had a question. Back on organizational design, I was recently involved with a company who was called in to look at an agile transformation. And it was interesting to note that what got involved with part of it was organizational change. And I guess there's this whole certification like either ADKAR or the traditional Cotter. And so they were kind of requiring that along with the agile changes, they were kind of getting into the organizational change. I don't see a lot of literature about that. What are your thoughts about involving other professionals with organizational change? It seems to actually speak to what you're talking about, where you involve changing the organization itself along with becoming agile.
I'm sorry, Robert, just to clarify, you don't see much literature that describes what?
Mention of, say, ADKAR or the Cotter, involving, like saying a code change involving other professionals that are seen sometimes as it's I think outside of Agile who are specialized in, say, the ADKAR model or the Cotter model.
But
Can you pull the slides, Gene, so we can see you better, but we can see each other.
You mean which one? This one? No. Oh, this one.
I was going to suggest taking down the slides, unless Rob wants to look at one.
Rob,
No, it was just
wait for this slide.
No, I was saying that your main point is that before you get to mindset, you deal with changing the culture. Right.
So, yeah, you're probably talking about this, the couple slides that refer to this in.
The one said mindset.
Yeah,
So
this one.
Before you get that one. So design, I'm actually a long time ago, former HR professional. So, and so more than design, I'm just saying that recently what I'm seeing, what was required by the company that was being addressed was that the involvement of organizational change professionals. And this is separate, and they specialize, like I'm saying, I had to look it up to know what it was. And so, for example, there's a whole certification and knowledge base about a couple models. Cotter, who's been around, the Cotter model has been around forever.
John Cotter, as in John Cotter's.
Yeah. Right. That's an early on model for organizational change. And then a more recent one, which some believe is more agile oriented, which is ADKAR. I
Yeah,
think,
I'm not that familiar with the second one, but I can tell you
yeah,
one thing. So I'm not sure if you're asking this question openly. Uh, is your question why companies do not leverage this other expertise of coaches and just keep talking about agile
right.
coaches? Or
Right. So they seem to be getting towards, I don't know if it's fully organizational design, but at least their organizational change it has to, they're more
well,
of change, but I would hope that maybe they get into things like John Cotter's model.
well,
Um,
let me give you my view on this, okay? And this
yeah.
is not to it's not conclusive. It's just my thought. I think I mentioned this from at the beginning of the discussion. In my honest view, and maybe I should go back to one of these cartoons, this slide right here. None of these guys and guys and gals. These are all of them are coaches, coaches of coaches and coaches of coaches and managers of agile managers. None of them speak the lingo. They're not true change agents that will bring this. I mean, majority of them are not. The term agile coaching today has been so diluted. It means pretty much anything you want. So what I covered in what I mentioned about the org design, some of these deep systemic improvements, implications of org design, they try not to talk about them, about those implications, because those those implications are strong. They could really ruffle feathers. And for people that are in business of pursuing a very steep career path, and they want to get promoted, this is really not to their benefit to rock the boat too much. Okay, so I would expect the vast majority of today's coaches will not be really addressing organizational design dynamics or organizational design frictions. It would be I'm not overly optimistic about the profession, about the role, um, for the next, unless there was some sort of a revival, unless there was an aha moment for companies say, you know what, I think we missed the boat. I think we need to snap back and smell the coffee.
Uh,
So
I I have a thought, Rob.
Mhm.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, James.
so a lot of these models that are change models are broader tool sets that are useful. This could be relevant to changing how you run a sales organization or a machine shop or any sort of larger organization, and perhaps those conceptual models are useful in understanding how to go about that. But when it comes to product development, uh, there are people who have actually, they have hands-on, real-world experience doing product development. I think we have a lot of them on this call, and uh, it's not a mystery. If I want to learn to be an electrician, I don't want to be taught how to be an electrician by some generic, oh, let me teach you how to learn a new skill type person. I really want to go spend time with an actual electrician who's had years in the field who can tell me how to do this stuff. Um, I don't pretend to know how to create a more effective, car factory or chip fab or how to run a more effective sales organization. That's not my area of expertise. But I think most Agilists who come from this early XP, the sort of ideas you'll see manifested within less, of creating a flatter org structure, um, creating truly self-managing, cross-functional, cross-component teams that are in direct collaboration with the users and customers. Um, we know how to do that. You just have to have enough faith to take the leap and make the actual structural changes. And you can put them in place within, Gene or I could go implement a less adoption and get it up and running within, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. I'm not saying it would be that they wouldn't be in a super mature state at that point, but you get management on board, which you usually take an executive offsite or something to finally get to a yes. You then do knowledge transfer for all the people who are going to be part of this. So you may have to, it may take you 2 or 3 weeks to sweep through, the 60, 80 people that you need. You're going to have to run a flip event or a launch event or whatever you want to call it, in which people self-organize into cross-functional teams and create the various artifacts that they need to manage this and get a good initial product backlog if you don't already have one, and get a good common definition of done they all agree on. And then they should be in sprint by the time you leave that activity, and they're going to stumble. And after 2 or 3 sprints, or this is assuming you're doing a Scrum nomenclature approach, uh, as long as management starts to demonstrate ideal behaviors, so that people accept that the ecosystem has indeed changed and it's not just lip service, you will see radically different behaviors almost overnight in corporate terms. Now, all this means is they'll stop digging the hole deeper. It may take a year or 2 or 3 to start dealing with all the technical cruft that they've built up over the years. But going in and doing this is relatively straightforward. And one of the beautiful parts of Less is they have canonized a lot of, Boss and Craig have canonized a lot of the things that I think more serious players in the Agile, or early Agile, it's almost like it's almost a time warp before the Agile industrial complex distorted everything. It's not really new. It's just uh, almost a blast from the past, but how do you do it at scale? Um, so I back to the ADKAR or the Cotter model. Not that there's not value there in helping to understand, but I don't think you want a generic change agent. You simply want someone who knows how to go fix a product development organization that happens to be aware of that information, whether he or she is aware of it because they formally could rattle off ADKAR on a whiteboard if asked, or whether they just intuitively have a grasp of it. Um, Again, I want that master electrician to teach me how to be an electrician, not random change consultant. Um, but that doesn't mean that knowledge set of might not be very applicable in changing less complex organizations. But product development's about as nasty in terms of complexity as one gets. Um,
Yeah, so I think you're getting to is what was pointed out as the experimentation and sort of a bottoms-up approach. I think the challenge, indicated at the very beginning with the scale, some companies are coming from this big stack, of organization, and how do you tell them to hold off? Like you just said, it could take a year because they want to have, results. Like group I was working with, they want to have results in 6 months. How do you deal with the mindset that all these people with all this stacked up structure going from such a tall hierarchy to a flat, even if you, like you just said, patiently bottoms up, experiment, and
no,
so
no,
forth.
I'm not. I'm saying that
Yeah.
you can get massive changes in behavior within a month or two,
Mm.
right? If you have someone who knows what the heck they're doing and you have authority to change the system. I believe Gene had something there that talked about,
Yeah.
this parallel org idea. Basically, instead of trying to fix the darn thing, you just go build new from scratch. It's sometimes the best way. Build a bubble, build new within the bubble. Uh, uh, the less nomenclature calls that a parallel organization.
Mm.
You'll hear in Scrum Org they'll refer to a studio model. I frequently use the word bubble just because people know what bubble means. Um, uh, but you
Just
can, and you're set up to succeed or fail, you know, before the teams actually start.
I just want to add something like just to make sure yeah. So yeah, these are very good comments from both of you guys. I just want to, since you mentioned this, yeah, the enterprise itself, like realistically speaking, if we are looking at things very realistically, chances of changing a huge organization of 50,000 people, overnight or even, over a year or 5 years in a one big bang approach, a slim to none, then none. Then it ain't happening.
Yeah, agreed.
So you might as well just live it up. So through you cannot do it through a revolution. You can do it through gradual evolution and gradual absorption gradual absorption of the old into the new, but you have to grow the new first. So the way to do this is to like spin off a small experiment or a studio or a lab or don't just make it a don't treat it as a temporary POC that is meant to go belly up and die. Treat it as something that's permanent, it's going to stay there and organically grow it and grow it. So eventually this beige, this orange house becomes no longer, and your green becomes big. This is a typical way to experiment, at least today, still very sadly. You make it the first initial good attempt, but then your large organizational structure, the antibodies that I call them, organizational antibodies, absorb it internally, suck it back in and kill it. Like a macrophage, if you remember from your biology, right? So that's not what
Yeah.
you want to do. You do not want to do this. You want to have this approach.
Doug, I saw you unmuting a bit ago. Did you have a question?
Yeah. Let's do one round robin and we have too small of a group to. Who else wants to chime
Uh,
in?
Ron, the only question, you guys are talking about, large change. I'm just wondering, will a large change happen without a real burning platform?
What's a burning platform?
The shit's gonna hit the fan. Excuse
Ah,
me, French.
got it.
You
Unless
mean
I, unless we do something, the
you
thing is
mean
gonna
you
crash.
yeah. I actually do understand Doug's question. So you're asking if we should expect any dramatic changes if there is mostly BAU and everyone is happy, right? Like if everyone is happy, nothing is overly pressing, why would someone go through those dramatic improvements? Is that what you're asking?
Basically, because someone mentioned something about having the proper level of authority, and certainly you can make a change if you have,
Yeah,
total authority, but
I'll
someone
do
has
I'll
to
do my
want, someone has to really, really want it then, right?
yeah, I'll give you my 2 cents. So I don't believe so. It's like we as humans are somewhere very selfish, and if there was if there was nothing for us to gain, we most likely are not going to change much. So and no
Mhm.
one's going to do it just out of very few people will do something out of good faith, out of good motto. Majority of people will do something because they have to, and especially organizations. So. Um, I don't want to drop any names of any companies that are no longer, but companies that were not, they screwed up and they're no longer. So especially larger companies that are not equipped to move the big whales, big dinosaurs, they're no longer around, right? They extinct. So I agree with you, Doug, if that's what you're implying, that there's got to be a state of urgency. There's got to be a state of criticality, like a feeling of criticality. If you don't have this feeling, then you're just going to be very complacent and we'll just get by. It is very important who is at the steering wheel. And this is why the first thing I always do when I come into an organization is I say, who is the highest paying person here? Who is the highest paid and most influential person? When I find that person, I want to understand how far he or she are willing to go and how far he or she are going until they retire with a golden parachute. If someone's got 3 years before they retire, it is super highly unlikely that they're going to change something dramatically. Especially if they have stock shares, especially if they're well-being and even if it's complacent, stale situation, they're not going to rock the boat. But if someone has like 15, 20 years ahead of them and they have a lot of the red dot on their backs and they need to change something, and they are being put in the influential position, those are your true change agents. You really want to double down on them. So this is actually not, this is purely human. Like I've seen some senior executives that are very empowered to make changes, but dude, you were like 3 years before you go you cash out. Well, why bother? Yeah.
I, I've learned something else related. So let no crisis go wasted is very much true. I agree with everything you and Doug and Gene are saying. Um, one of the things I've observed is the crisis only lasts so long before the weather changes. And
Yeah.
so what you find is that when that window of opportunity opens, it is critical to if you want to make change, it is critical to take action with enough aggression, with enough breadth and depth before that window closes. Um, this shows up in my last case study where a few months in I lost the original GM, and the level of support that I had after that was not nearly as good. And due to cultural momentum, I was still there another year, and we still did some amazing changes. But um, so much of the things that would have allowed it to cement the change and survive my leaving um, didn't happen because I did not have the skill set and the wisdom at the time to get enough enrollment from the upper middle management and lower upper management. I did not have the skill set to get enough buy-in and commitment from the upper middle management and the lower upper management that it would be difficult for them to that they would lose face by rolling it back. I had super high level guy was willing to support me all the way. I had two or three people down a vertical that were willing to do change and eagerly did so, and we did amazing things. But some of the passive aggressive behavior parallel some other senior vice presidents and senior directors. Um, there were VPs and senior directors that were problematic. And had I had the skill set and the knowledge to move fast enough, um, I think we would have been more successful in the longer term. Instead of just kind of the grass grew for a while, and because we changed the garden conditions, but it didn't grow for years because we didn't quite get deep enough. The team level behaviors changed, but higher level behaviors didn't change to the extent we needed.
So we're getting late for our speaker. So I want to do two things. One, is there one last question that's burning in someone's mind? And the second thing, and if you've got that, unmute and ask it. And the second thing will be to ask Gene if he's got a final word of wisdom for us before we share. And I should note that our next meeting, while both of you are thinking about that, our next meeting is Mindset Before Methods, Lean Thinking in an Agile World. And we have Purnima, one of our co-chairs, signed up to share a case study of enterprise agility transformation on April 9th. So now back to, is there a last question? I don't see anyone
Yeah, I'll take
unmuting.
one more. Sure. Big one. I mean, based on what we discussed, or
Yeah,
anything that's relatively close. I'm enjoying the
I
paint.
don't see anyone unmuting, Gene. So do you have a last comment or something to send us
Yeah,
off with?
sure. I would like to just end on a positive note by saying, like, you kind of feel from some of these slides, and I get this from people from time to time. These are all like somewhat negative connotation like pessimistic, dismissive. Look, at the end, obviously, yeah, I like to put some irony into these graphics, but I am very strongly, emotionally involved and strongly supportive of quality and authenticity of people that should have the name, the word coach in their name tag. So my word of wisdom is this: continue maintaining high quality, high you know um, high level of education, self-education, and keep the bar high. I do genuinely believe that the market should self-correct and improve. And for those that actually bring the quality to the table, there will be a new era of success. I think AI, lots of people talk about AI these days, will weed out low quality people and low quality everything much quicker than high quality. So keeping the bar high actually is a way to stay above water. But specifically on the topic of agile enterprise scaling, again, you really want to minimize your effort by going deep and narrow by nailing what you can improve systemically, deeply, and globally. And for this, you need to find uh, good supporters, people that are empowered and properly positioned and properly motivated and incentivized, including senior people. So that's why, I think Doug's question was very relevant because you need to have people with urgency that are willing to change something because if not, then what else? Or else.
I like your focus on scaling product, not scaling organization.
Yeah,
I
this
think
is
that's
another thing.
a
If you,
real a
yeah,
really good pointer.
yeah, you really want to scale around something that brings value and generates hard money, hard cash. So scaling goodness will, if you have small goodness to begin with, it's going to amplify and become goodness to the power of whatever. But if you're scaling bad stuff, it's just going to be more dysfunction. So you want to scale around simple product development into large scale product development, and that's a good organic way to do this at the enterprise level, as people say, like enterprise level. Yeah.
Gopal, any final comments?
It's
All from me.
great. Thank you. Thank you, Gene. Appreciate the time. I just want to ask people, do they have any announcements or anything before we sign off?
I don't. It will be very selfish to say I have a class coming up, but people already saw the slide. It's not hard to find, but I don't have anything.
I
Okay.
have a San Francisco class coming up in whenever it is. That is San Francisco is April 22nd to 24th. It's in Hyatt, just south of the airport, south of SFO. Um, I also have one in Chicago and elsewhere, but those are the ones uh,
And
uh,
Gene,
that are
where's
close to
yours?
this group.
What, Ron, what?
And Gene, where is your class going to be held?
It's virtual. It's
Virtual
Yeah,
virtual.
class.
yeah, it's
Okay, so
online.
you've got a virtual class as well. Great. Great. I will point out that one of our previous speakers, Rich Mironoff, has just come out with his book, Money Stories, how to talk to executive leaders in their lingo, not ours, which I think is really valuable.
Hmm. I believe that sounds like valuable, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. If I'm honorably dismissed, I'm going to retreat to my quarters, and I need to get some food and unplug for the evening because it's I'm dozing off a little.
Yeah, thanks so much, Gene.
Great.
Really
It
appreciate
was a great
it.
time, and thank you for joining, and thank you for asking questions and making comments.
Thanks so
Yeah.
much, Gene.
Everyone, thank you. Oh, and by the way, the slides will be available. I posted the link in the chat window. And Ron, if you would be so kind, and Rob and Gopal, when you guys have a recording, would you also share it with me?
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Excellent. Okay. And I'll share my deck with you too. All right, everyone, have a good night. Have a good night. Enjoy.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good night.